Welcome to the She Births Show, a place to inspire your birth, evolve your parenting, and help you live a life you love. I'm Nadine Richardson, your host and creator of the scientifically verified birth education program, She Births. I'm also a mother, yoga teacher, doula, author, and speaker. At She Births, we have supported thousands of families around the world for over 13 years with our unique program, and our vision is to make birth better for every family around the world so that everyone experiences a beautiful birth no matter what unfolds. Not only do we help people have beautiful births, but we also give them the skills and the philosophy to enjoy pregnancy and make parenting easier. As well as our world-class birth ed, taken either face-to-face or online in our app, we also have a free pregnancy guide designed to help you feel calm, connected, and inspired as you and your baby grow. We have a doula matching service, the perfect way to ensure you and your partner are completely supported throughout the whole journey. And we have our Soul Mama Circles, which are the perfect postpartum network to help optimize your mindset and design your life in parenthood. Remember, if you like what you hear today, subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review. If you're a parent, about to be one, fellow health professional, join us now for an inspirational deep dive into topics with experts around the globe. We hope you enjoy this special episode. Welcome to episode 2 in our Rise of the Feminine season. In this collection of podcasts, I'm talking about birthing and living in a new way that fully honours our feminine journey and aspects, from caring for the earth to honouring our elders, and of course how the feminine arises within us during pregnancy, birth, and beyond. Make sure that you listen at the very end of each episode this season to hear each guest's vision and experience of that feminine rising. Today I speak with the wonderful Amelie, who is currently living in France as a solo mum. She helped found our doula service and was a doula before becoming a mum. Amelie tells her story about an assisted spiritual conception and her birth with her sister and mum at her side. I hope you enjoy hearing about how birth cultures vary in different parts of the world. France has an extremely high epidural rate of 80%. We talk about the acceleration of evolution that happened due to the pandemic and the power of silence. We talk about the power of pre-labour and altered states of consciousness. Talk about going into pain and how time expands and all these other wonderful gifts of labour. And one of my favourite parts is the mother and baby landing and then meeting. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Amelie. Welcome to the She Births Show.
Hi, Nadine.
Welcome, welcome. It's nice to talk to you out of a staff meeting.
Yes.
Nice to see you. And you've just dropped your little boy off at daycare, and I've just picked up my 2 dogs from daycare.
Great. Mum's work.
Mum's work, because you're all the way around the globe in Paris, France. And I'm going to share your story on our podcast because I think it's just such a beautiful one. It's a unique one. And we're all about inclusion and diversity and celebrating diversity here at She Births. And how do you feel about sharing your story?
Well, I'm really excited because I think it helps a lot of other moms make sense sometimes of how we feel about becoming a mother and how important it can be for some of us. Until you become a mom, it's like such a, something you really, really want to do, and you can't get your head around it sometimes of how much you want to become a mom. I mean, it was definitely my case, I guess. I was actually originally in a relationship with someone, and, we definitely wanted to have a kid together. And then, life happens and he got really, really sick. And I think when you get sick in life, you sometimes have like big life realizations of, you know, what your life means and where you're going and where you're heading. And so after he got better, after his cancer, he sort of realized that he wanted to totally like turn his life around and do something totally different. And I think at that time for him, being in a relationship didn't enable that for him. And even more becoming a father. So it was like long discussions of like, okay, well, where are we going here? You know, and I was a bit older than him, and I really wanted to become a mom, and I'd been waiting and, you know, understanding that he needed time to be ready. And so I think at some point, you know, after we couldn't agree on, you know, timing and, you know, how long it would take for him to put his head around his life. And so we just decided to separate. So we did a bit of a Gwyneth Paltrow conscious and coupling process, I think.
Wow.
And we sort of tried to make it as smooth and peaceful as possible. And like today we're still friends. So I guess we managed in a way. Not easy, because I was, you know, very much in love with him. So I definitely needed time away, and, you know, we sort of didn't talk for some time and then sort of reconnected. And he was just, he was just very lost and, you know, trying to find his path. And I could understand that, because like we've all been, you know, through those times in our lives. And so I found myself, I was 36. That isn't super old, but for me, it was really a timing where I'd been waiting to be a mom for a long time. And I was like, okay, what's my next step? And I had the two choices for me. I had either you turn towards, I don't know, like a dating app, and you try and meet someone, or you just accept where you are, and that's, you know, you're heartbroken and you don't feel open to meet someone else. And you still, you know, you're still dealing with your own feelings with your ex-partner. And I didn't have space to welcome someone new in my life. And I'm not a dating app person. I'm like, I hate it. I've never done it. And I just couldn't picture myself, you know, doing it. And then COVID started. So we were all in lockdown in Sydney. And I was in Sydney at the time, of course. And, you know, you're in lockdown and you're thinking, okay, how long is this going to last? And then, you know, I lost my sort of daytime job, the one I do to pay the rent on the side of being a doula. I lost that job, and then I had so much time to just be at home and think. And it's great because it helps you process the hard feelings of a breakup. But it also, I felt in my case, it really accelerated time. And I felt like things were going so fast in my head, you know, in terms of, I don't know, like looking where I was at in my life, looking at what was important for me. And so what happened in maybe 6 months, you know, in a different life would have taken me like a couple of years. And I actually ended up, I fell on this book on solo mothering, and a, you know, book on solo moms, a woman in the States who actually decided to become a solo mom. And she actually had twins. And her book was beautiful, and it really shared like the hard times of becoming a solo mom. And because of the cancer with my ex-partner, we had already explored, I guess, fertility treatments, because he had lost his fertility. So we had already had the chat about, you know, using science to make a baby, and also the idea of using a donor, because that was something when we met with the doctors that did actually mention that, you know, if his fertility didn't come back, we would probably have to use a donor. And I realized at the time what a huge decision that would have been. I think because he was processing so many things, he hadn't really put his head around it. But I think for me, I'd really thought, oh, wow, you know, it's a big thing to choose a donor. And then when I found myself on my own, I don't know, for me, I felt like, you know, two choices: either I become a mother now and I really do what's so important for me, or I try and find a partner, but I knew I wouldn't be in the right headspace. I would just find like a daddy for my baby, and it wouldn't be fair for that guy. It wouldn't be fair for the baby, and probably it wouldn't be fair for myself. Because when you're looking for someone and that's the only obsession you have, you're not really in a good space.
Yeah, I mean, you've just brought up some really good points. I loved what you just said. I mean, about the accelerating COVID, just like accelerated change. And maybe it was, we were all sent, I just think, and as well here in Australia with the floods, it's like Mother Nature is just saying, no, get into your room and just stay there. Like you're sent to your room as a naughty little child. And even if you haven't been naughty, we're all in this together. We're all a contributor to this collective naughtiness. And, and so it made us really deeply reflect about what is important, which shows you the value of silence. And, you and I are both yoga teachers. And it just drives me frigging mad. Honest to God, I had to stop going to other people's yoga classes when I was down in Sydney because I was getting a pain in my leg. And I came out of a class and I just like, my God, what is this pain in my leg? I've just done a yoga class. Oh, that pain. That's right. I just wanted to kick the teacher and tell them to shut up. Just stop talking. Just stop talking and let us have some silence. I'm sorry to those yoga teachers. And that's fine if you want to talk your whole way through a yoga class, but podcasts are for talking. Yoga classes are for silence and for finding that space to discover. And so I can imagine a guy who's younger, who's gone through, facing his mortality really young and losing fertility, is going to be questioning the fuck out of his life, right? And you've become a yoga teacher and a doula, so you've already started listening to your soul and listening to your heart and those whispers. So in a sense, you were never really going to match anyway. Like nature's kind of, so many marriages.
That's totally how it feels looking back. Absolutely.
Yeah. And and I love your brutal honesty. I mean, about like going on the dating apps. Yeah, I just can't do it either. And I've been a solo mum for a long time. I just can't do it. And we often just feel such a desperation to become a mum. I felt it at, 24, and you feel it at 36, and it does come over you. And I honestly think as a yogi, it's also the child's soul is like looming around you. Absolutely. It's like hovering. It's in your field. They're like tapping on your soul and your heart, and they're saying, I want to come through. And if that's okay, you don't have to listen to that. They'll wander off to another soul to birth them. But I think that's probably what's happening.
Yeah, I strongly felt that way. And I like the whole of the process of even thinking about that child and then becoming pregnant, I actually wrote I journaled so much. I wrote two diaries for him.
Wow.
And I'll give it to him one day. He's a boy, so I don't know if he'll be interested in reading his mom's old diaries. I feel like maybe, who knows. But yeah, I just had so much things to tell him, and to tell
how. Oh my God, that's so beautiful.
Such a long time and waiting for him, and I totally agree with you. I really felt that he was there, he was waiting to come.
That is,
and
so beautiful.
I actually have a beautiful story about that. So of course I went through a fertility clinic, and I got help, and I did an insemination to get pregnant. So all that's so far from the lovemaking process that it's interesting, and it's and I thought so much about women who decide to become pregnant as a couple, and how weird it must feel sometimes just going through that fertility process, and all the couples having fertility issues. It's definitely hard. I think being on my own, it was easier because that was the only way. But yeah, I had an interesting story where I had just done the fertility process, the insemination, and I was walking in a park up on the northern beaches where I lived, and I didn't know I was pregnant, and I absolutely didn't know it was a boy. But I had always had this name in my head that was Elijah, so Eli for short. And I'm called Amelie, and Amelie's quite a rare name in Australia because, it's either Emily or Amelia, but Amelie, that's French, isn't so common. And I was walking in this, dog park, and there's this little secret little place where it's like a fairy garden. And there's all sorts of kids' toys and little, words for fairies and everything. It's gorgeous. and there was this little sign up, and it said, "Hello, Amelie and Eli."
What?
And I was like, what? And I was actually walking in that park with my ex, and I said to him, "That's incredible." I said, "That's a sign." And I said to him, "I take that as a sign. I'm going to be pregnant, and it's going to be a boy." And we sort of had a laugh about it. And, 3 months down the track, you are pregnant and it's a boy. And I've called him Elijah. And it's just incredible. I love that story. It's like so special.
Awesome. It's so beautiful. It's so
magical.
cool. Yeah. I mean, it's so cool to understand. We were just talking about intuition as well, weren't we, before,
Yeah.
Intuition is just the openness to read the signs within your body and around your body. Like the whole earth is your body. We are one body. We are nature. And of course, life is just an occurrence that's sort of orchestrated, and we're just remembering as we go along, right? It's such a cool thing. So,
exactly. And that's what I was trying when I did the process. It's good at kind of reminding yourself that if it's supposed to work, it will work. It was like, if I need to fall pregnant in that way, if that's my journey, it will work. And I sort of had set myself like, 2-3 tries. I didn't want to go through IVF. That was kind of my next step. And I was like, okay, I'll try naturally, or as naturally as possible, with insemination. And if that doesn't work, then I'll give myself a break. And maybe I will meet someone, that random meeting person that you'd never imagine you would meet, and it would connect and whatever. Like I was just like, let's see if it works. And it did work the second time. And I thought, okay, well, that's just meant to be. And I stayed in Australia. Of course, we were still all in lockdown. And I was, working from home, actually working for She Birth, doing the doula program. And then after a few months, I thought, okay, well, this pregnancy's, going ahead. And I felt I needed to go back home. And home for me is different places. Australia is definitely home for me also. But my mom's South African, and she's living in France, and my sister's living in France. So I was like, I need to go back to my women, and they're my close network. And of course, I have friends and I have, family in Sydney, but not the type of people that you can ask anything from.
Yeah.
The people you can call at 2 a.m. because you're not feeling good, or someone you can call at the last minute because you have a childcare problem. And so I knew I needed to surround myself with those people. And I know what it is to be living overseas. And I mean, we have so many couples at She Birth that are expats that come from other places in the world, and it's so hard when you become a parent to not have a really close network around you. And sometimes friends are great, but sometimes, they're busy with their own lives.
Of course.
So I made the decision to go back to France. So I was about 4 months pregnant when I came back, and it was apocalypse in planes. I mean, I arrived at Sydney Airport. Everyone was dressed in like white suits, walking around. Everything was closed. We were maybe like 40 people in the whole airport.
Wow.
So strange. And it was the best flight I ever had in my life. We were like, 20 people in the plane. You had the whole row for yourself. You could lie down. That when you're 4 months pregnant is amazing. And it was such a weird experience. I mean, for so many people who traveled at that time, and arrived back in France. And then in France, again, it was a lockdown. So I sort of, you're changing your whole life. I'd been in Australia for 7 years. And you come back to France, and, you're starting a new life from scratch, but there's nothing. There's nothing. Nothing is open. Everything's closed. You can't see your friends. You can't see, your other members of your family. And plus, I was coming back from overseas. I couldn't even find a place to rent. So I had to go back and live with my mom, that I adore. But it's still, when you're an adult and your mom's been living on her own for a long time, it's such a big adjustment to live with parents again.
Huge. It's huge. I mean, we did that too. We were living back with my mum in COVID because, we were ready to leave. I was about to go on gap year, and I was going to go traveling or whatever. And we ended up with my mum too. It was actually really beautiful. And my dad too. It was, with dad's place, mum's place. It was actually really beautiful.
Yeah. it's a strange way. And I was landing also, I was landing my whole life again.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I had times of tears. I would just like sob, and I mean, I'm so glad my mum was there for those times, because it just felt so unreal. And plus, I do work, we do a job that isn't easy. I mean, being a doula, you have to create a network, you have to, build new connections and, meeting new people, etc.
Yeah.
And plus, I was arriving in a country where our doula work isn't valued, isn't respected. So it was, I had so much grief for so many things, and I was still grieving my ex-relationship, and I was so happy about that pregnancy. But I think I was grieving having to leave Australia. Like Australia, has always felt like my land of my heart. I just couldn't explain why it was so important to me.
Yeah.
And and then, with time, again, giving yourself time and just accepting where you're at, and, one day after the other, trying to cope. And of course, the happiness of seeing your belly grow. And I had a huge belly so fast because that baby was like so wanted. He had all the space he needed.
Yeah.
And also adjusting to a new medical system, because I'd done 4 months of follow-ups in Australia, and then arriving in a new country. And for example, in Australia, our due dates are 41 weeks. 40 weeks. And in France, the due date is 41 weeks. So even that is like a bit strange, because, the end of your pregnancy that you have in your mind is sort of, again, is like a bit different. And of course, so many medical processes and everything are different also here.
And now for a quick break. At She Births, we believe that pregnancy, birth and matrescence, the sacred postpartum, is an awesome rite of passage. Our free holistic pregnancy guide offers you 6 months of weekly support. Drop straight into your inbox, or within our free She Births app, you can get content that will nourish your body, mind and soul. You can enjoy prenatal yoga videos, great recipes, birth affirmations, course discounts and more. From me and my team, the creator of the world's only scientifically verified antenatal classes, it is our gift to you. Sign up today and receive the free holistic pregnancy guide at shebirths.com/PG. That's shebirths.com/PG.
So for me, there was one obvious, especially because it was also COVID and I didn't know the medical system well when I arrived. For me, it was a non-negotiable, was to have a home birth. That was just an obvious choice. So already when I was in Australia, I had already contacted home birth midwives, but you know how busy they are. Even finding a home.
I mean, what was it like?
I mean, of the world, it's
well, yeah, I'm sure. Like that's what it's like for so many families that came out here as well in lockdowns.
Exactly.
And all of that at any time. So, I mean, we have to talk about, how France is so different to Australia and all of that kind of stuff in terms of systems and birth. But your mum and your sister sound like very cool family because they did the prep with you. And I just really think that's such a beautiful thing. Like, did you do the whole online course or something together? Is that what you did?
So, of course, I know the She Birth course off by heart. I've assisted you, Nadine, many, many times in the face-to-face courses. And, of course, I work with She Birth and I work with couples, so I know the course really well. But my sister, who's 5 years younger than me and who doesn't have kids, and she's a psychologist and she actually works with women's sexuality a lot and couples, and she does all that work. And she became passionate about birth, just like hanging out with me anyway. And so she did the whole She Birth course with me.
Awesome.
And we watched like all the videos together and practiced everything, because I know we knew my sister would be my main person, just because my mom's in her 70s, so physically it's hard to assist someone in birth. So it was obvious my sister would be my main support. But my mum still did all the course with us too and watched all the videos, and we would like put pause and have a chat. And, she would tell us details about her own births that, had been without,
beautiful.
epidurals and that were, good, positive. My mom always she always told positive stories about birth, and that, we can do it, no fuss kind of, talk, not emotional about it, but very much like, we can do it. It's hard work, but, women know how to birth. That was kind of how I grew up. And my sister, she's a very emotional person, so she would cry when she watched like the birth videos. She would really also realize what it would be like to assist to my son's birth. I think she really realized how big it was. And she would always tell me what an honor it was to even be able to see that. I did have a little bit of pressure, I think, because she didn't have kids, and I was like, I hope it all goes well and I don't traumatize her with something going wrong. But no, luckily, it was a great birth. And I had two midwives. I was lucky. It's not always the case, but the midwife I had, she always works with a backup doula, with a backup midwife. So I had two midwives who were both beautiful. My initial midwife was very, very hands off. Like, she doesn't touch anything. She doesn't touch you. She doesn't touch the baby when he's born. She doesn't help him come out. Like, she just leaves everything to be. That was almost like, I hadn't realized, it was almost surprising for me, because when you've been a doula and you've assisted to birth in hospital, you're so used to seeing the midwife sometimes, help the baby get out. But I think at some point I was like, I sort of looked at her and I was like, am I doing this? Like, and she was like, yep, you go ahead. I was like, okay. It was kind of amazing. And then the other one, she's an acupuncturist. So she was so amazing with her touch. She was just so mothering. Like, she had such a beautiful energy. And then I still had a doula, because being a doula, I knew I still needed someone else who would also reassure my mom and my sister.
Yes, that's right.
It's really big for them. And, my mom doesn't say anything, but she feels everything inside. And then my sister's like a big crier. So I was like, I think, they need the support. So we had
I love that.
Yes, it was lovely. And then I had a photographer, because for me, it was the biggest day of my life. And I absolutely wanted memories of that. And I think in Australia, we're so used to having, seeing birth photos. And on Instagram nowadays, you see so many gorgeous photos. I mean, we share them on the Instagram feed of SheBirth. But in France, it actually struggled to even find a photographer who'd already been at a birth. Like, no one does that. Everyone does like pregnancy photos and then newborn photos. And I had so many friends who were like, why would you want to take a photo of that? It's like horrible. And I was like, no, it's like your wedding. It's the most important day of your life. Such a different mentality about birth here.
Yes.
And I found a young photographer who did beautiful, young women. She was a very, very good photographer, but she'd never been at a birth. So I actually briefed her, I showed her videos and I showed her photos also, so she could, put her head around what she would be looking at.
Your photos are beautiful, by the way. I mean, they are gorgeous. Are you happy with your photos?
I'm super happy. I think at first, at least for me, when I first looked at them, I was, I didn't really I was a bit judgmental about myself and my body. And I was looking at weird details. And then the more you go ahead, and also the more you build a relationship with your child, now I cry when I look at them. So there was a bit of a process. I definitely needed time to adjust also to like meeting a new person, like, you're meeting your child that you don't know. I know some moms, they just fall in love as soon as the baby's on them. And I definitely felt protective and, wanting to nurture him. But I think the love I really felt sort of built as we got to know each other.
That's so interesting. We need to talk about that. So, I mean, should we go over the birth a little bit? Like, was it a long labor? Was it?
It was a normal first labor. I think it started, so I had the on and off, where the night before you starting to have contractions and you're like, okay, this is it, it's starting. And then in the morning they stop. And then you're a bit disappointed because you thought that was going to be the day. And then you're like, oh, what's happening? And you wonder if it's going to start again. And I think being a doula, I love the book Birthing from Within, and she actually talks about it in the beginning where she says, she was a midwife, and sometimes you put so much expectation on yourself because you have this idea of the birth you want to have. And that's also what's interesting about being a doula before becoming a mum. So of course there's a bit of pressure, and you want to do the best. But at the same time, you need to let go of your expectations. And I actually did a beautiful blessing way with my friends just before I gave birth. And I did birth affirmations. And a lot of it was around, let go of your expectations, just be in the present moment. You're not there to perform. For me, that was a lot of the letting go was around that. And around just accepting that, you're just a birthing woman, and that's all that you are at that moment.
Yeah, and I think I've heard people sort of another meditator, a friend, she was saying, I just had this moment in pre-labor, because I think for pre-labor, for a lot of us, this sort of psychological journey it's a head trip. We're coming out of our heads into our bodies, and anything that's going to come up as a sort of default self-doubt thought is rising now to be cleared for a deeper surrender. So I love that, of course, the expectation, and if you are a birth worker, or for me, even as a yoga teacher, you have this pressure as well as to perform. It's so weird. Oh, you're young and you'll be fine, whatever that means. But I think that's a really beautiful sort of capturing, letting go. And this mum told me that one day she was in pre-labor and she just had this moment of looking out, watching the sunrise. And she goes, and that's it now. It'll just be whatever it be. It was almost like I'm closing the books. I will just let everything happen, nothing else to learn, just knowing it'll just be whatever it'll be.
Absolutely. And I think it's true for all mothers, especially the ones that are the ones that study, the good students, the one that read all the books and, have, they've done the She Birth course, but right until the end, they're reading and learning. And I think at some point in the last few weeks, you just need to let go of all of that and just be whatever needs to happen will happen. Because,
totally.
If not, you're holding on to something, and it's not easy, definitely not easy. But that's what I try to do as best as possible. So labor started, then it sort of stopped. And then that following night, it started again during the night. Of course, it was a full moon weekend. And interestingly enough, it was actually my Australian due date that I found was so beautiful because, my little boy, his donor's Australian. And I'm so attached to that country. It just sort of made, for me, it sort of made sense also. It was beautiful. It started, quite strong, quite quickly. So I was just trying to handle it. And it was the middle of the night, 2 or 3. And my mom and my sister were sleeping. So I was trying to be silent in my bedroom, just waiting for things to grow. And I didn't want to wake them up so they could have the more rest. But of course, they're very intuitive and they have, very light sleep. So they quickly heard me, and they actually both came out of their rooms and woke up at the same time. And and we had some giggles because my sister put the tense machine on, but it was full power on my back. So we sort of had a really good laugh for that. And I just put my music on. I had a noise cancelling headphones. And
nice.
And I was listening to my yoga playlists. Actually, one of the playlists I love is, the She Birth playlist we have for birth is beautiful. A lot of tracks on there that I love. So I was just listening to my music, and they were organizing everything in the living room and, pumping the pool up and doing all that. And when I came down, everything was ready. And my sister, she'd done such a beautiful place with little fairy lights, and it was just so gorgeous. And there was so much happening behind the scene that I didn't even know about. My midwife, her phone had cut out and her battery had run out, and she didn't receive my sister's call. So luckily there was a backup midwife. So there was all sorts of things happening in the background that they handled, with my doula. And I was just
oblivious.
in my little bubble.
That's so good. That's so good.
So good of them.
Yeah.
And then I got in the pool, and that was so helpful. I definitely enjoyed the water. Stayed there a long time, like a few hours. And I remember in the water, I was still listening to my music, and there was one track that was really, that was actually a track that my ex-partner had shared. And that was a very emotional music. And I remember of that really special time lying in the bath where I really cried so much. And I, didn't share with anyone around me what was happening, but, I was crying on like saying goodbye to him and also welcoming my little boy. It was such a powerful moment, so emotional.
Wow. It's such an altered state, Yeah. An altered state of consciousness is what we go into with birth if we're given the space to, which is what you were being cared for so that you could go into this altered state, not to be bothered with the world, not to be bothered with the creation, atmosphere creation, or, organizing people and stuff like that. I think it's so important for, and I think photos and videos capture it a little bit. But so often we're seeing these very medicalized births in clinical settings with people screaming at mothers, telling them what to do, and, and metal instruments everywhere, and no one holding her hand or stroking her face, or, if she is having an emotional moment, just allowing her that space. But you can only have those really emotional releases anyway if you're being held. And, it's psychedelic. You're in a psychedelic state, an altered state. And which literally means you are extremely open, and the subconscious can come to the fore, everything that's there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen and I've heard women, like a midwife saying to her, "Why are you crying? Everything's fine."
Oh my God, are you serious? Oh my God.
And you're like, okay, everything's fine. That's not the problem. Crying is just part of the process. Just leave her be. Like,
yes.
Oh God. So that was gorgeous. And I really I have really good memories of all that, all the time, all the birthing process of being in the pool and then coming out. My midwife was trained with like Mexican rebozo. And she would really use the rebozo in quite a dynamic way, I would say, that is very uncomfortable, that I'm sure works very well, but it's definitely not the gentle rebozo.
They're not comfort measures. They're not the classical comfort measures. No,
exactly.
Not. No.
So that was a bit of a, not very nice, but definitely, probably getting things moving on.
Why did you need that? What was going on? Were things just stalling, or what was going on?
No, I don't think things were stalling, but I got out of the pool, and I think she maybe wanted to help things to go along. That's maybe a moment that I don't know if it was necessary, I guess. And that's the only moment where she actually, did touch me. And she sort of said, I think she was feeling like I was contracting my bottom a lot. And she wanted the muscles to really like be soft and relaxed.
So she did the birth twerk on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Shake the apple tree on your butt. During a contraction or in between? Or both?
Both.
Wow. Okay.
And it was quite strong. And I kind of, I really wanted to push her away a bit. So I was like, no, that's too intense. And I was also standing, after lying in the bath for some time. So everything's quite full on anyway.
Yeah.
And then it was sort of, going on all fours and, coming back up. And I was in my sister's arms a lot from there. And my sister, like, she has such a beautiful touch, and she was just, stroking my back and my hair and, being so present for me. And the photos we have are just so beautiful. And, we almost look like a couple, because that's what a woman needs. She needs
totally
sensuality, not of sexuality, but the sensuality of being touched and being cared for and being said that you're beautiful and that you're doing amazing. I mean, we still need that, whether you have a partner or not. And,
totally.
And then I actually ended up on the bed on all fours, and I had my birth ball in front of me, and I was leaning on the birth ball and then holding onto my sister's, arms. And so we were sort of holding each other's arms, and I could really pull on her arms and use the birth ball. And actually also, I love what my midwife said. I found that really interesting. Like, she said, you need to alternate between going to meet the pain and then going back a bit. And she was like, if you don't accept to go and meet the pain from time to time, things will be longer. So she totally. A dance, of like going and touching the pain, touching the pain a bit and then backing off.
That's true.
It was so true.
That's partly, yeah. So like what she's doing, that letting go of the glutes and getting more pain in a way going was going to speed up your labor, and it was going to build up your endorphins and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
I get what she says. Yeah.
I've
often thought that as a doula, to help speed up a birth, but I don't think I'd twerk somebody in the middle of their sex.
No. So it was also like, accepting to be like, you're on all fours and you're a bit in a squatting position, and then you can ease off and like, go forward again and get a bit of a rest. So it was alternating that. But I think the pushing phase in my case felt really, really hard. I think that was for me the hard part of the birth. And it's interesting when you work with women, because some will find the contractions really hard to handle, and some will find the pushing phase like almost like wonderful, because finally you're feeling like you can push and you're feeling more active. And in my case, it was the contrary. Like all the contraction time was beautiful in my zone, but then the pushing phase I found really hard. So looking back on it, I actually think I might have started pushing. Like I didn't have the natural reflex of the body pushing my baby out. I didn't really feel that, and so maybe it was the lack of waiting a little bit longer. Maybe I would have. It was probably fully dilated, but maybe I could have waited a bit before.
Room to descend a little bit. Yeah, to see if he descended and just hit that little reflex, that Ferguson's reflex. Yeah.
Exactly. So I didn't do that. And I think at some point, my midwife said, "Oh, do you feel like you want to push?" And I said, "No." And I still went ahead and decided I was going to push, because I also knew that, because it was so intense, the pushing phase and where he was at, I was like, I actually want him out because this is getting really intense. So I think maybe I would have needed a bit more support at that time. And I think maybe that's where, unfortunately, as the doulas, and we'll talk about it together, but the doulas in France, they don't have the same level of experience as, what we would have in Australia. And even though the lady who was with me, she was definitely experienced, but I think maybe no one in the room really saw what was happening for me then. And of course, you're not always able to, to explain what's happening for you.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of projection, in all honesty. The mind is so plastic. You're in this open state, and someone says, "Do you feel like pushing?" It's projecting onto them. And so you receive that as information. You're like, well, I should. Yes. Well, I want him out. Like, you just start, the mind just goes into what's being spoken around.
Yeah.
It's so sensitive that.
I think you're very right, Nadine. And I think it was probably, the words that were said at that time sort of influenced me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now for a quick break. Contrary to popular culture, She Births believes that childbirth can be the best day of your life. It is designed perfectly to be empowering, enriching, and bonding. An awesome rite of passage. Our childbirth education programs have helped thousands of families around the world since 2008, allowing families to not only feel empowered through education, but also connect with their innate birthing wisdom to create the best birth possible and begin their parenting journey with confidence. She Birth's unique methodology was scrutinised in university trials and has been published in the British Medical Journal for improving birth outcomes for both mother and child. I'd like to invite you to begin preparing for birth today. Just go to shebirths.com to discover our 2-day weekend face-to-face courses or access the online courses from anywhere around the world. That's shebirths.com. Create your beautiful birth with the world's only scientifically verified antenatal classes.
We always learn every birth.
Exactly. And that's kind of for me, that was the biggest learning. And I've read so much about like, how it works and how the reflex starts and everything, because of course, then you're kind of curious about something. And so, the pushing phase was intense. And, some women will describe the ring of fire and others will describe you feel like you being open in half. I definitely felt I was being opened in half. It didn't feel like a little sting and a little ring of fire. It was really intense. And the idea that you think it's not going to go through, and it is, but you still, a part of your brain thinks, it's a sort of coming very close to death, but coming very close to that, as you always say in the She Birth course, that fine line between, birth and the other side. So I definitely felt all of that. That was really intense. So I can't say I keep a beautiful memory of that time. And when he came out, I think I lasted 2 hours all in for all. The pushing phase was really long.
And it's so much
having
work.
a home birth wife who trusts the process, Yeah. She didn't try and speed up things. She wasn't worried. She was still monitoring, intermittent monitoring, checking from time to time, but I didn't feel pressured at all, even though it was long. And when my son came out, I was on all fours. And so he just he fell on the bed, really. I was very low, in a squatting position, and he fell on the bed. And again, I experienced something that I'd never seen before. That is really the fact that, and my midwife explained it again, is the mother's landing and the baby's landing. And it takes a few seconds or a few minutes to actually realize what happened.
Yeah.
And for a mother to actually look at her child and then pick him up and put him against her. And I'd never really witnessed that, because most of the time, a baby comes out and someone will stick the baby on the mom's chest. And we all see that, the mom's looking around, and sometimes, her head's back and she's actually just recuperating from the huge effort she's just done. Yeah. And often mothers don't look at their babies initially, not always, they won't straight away connect. And I really experienced that, having no one interfere with that. And I sort of first looked at him on the bed, and, you sort of take your breath and you look around and you're like, oh my God, what have I just done? And then I sort of crouched on him and sort of put my arms around him and protected him. And I didn't pick him up. I was just looking at him. And then after a few minutes, I picked him up, and then I took him against me. And then I started crying, and then I was very emotional. But there was this little pause before the next step.
I think that word. Yeah, wow. I mean, I think that word landing is perfect, what your midwife said. It's just the mother and the baby are landing. And I remember watching this film years and years ago, 20 years ago, of tribal women giving birth. And I don't know how they got the footage. It was an anthropologist that went out and watched and filmed women birthing. But they literally just were squatting down, and they'd have sarongs on the ground, on the dirt, and their babies would just land on the sarongs. They'd be nice and low like that. And they'd just stare and watch and look and just kind of, take it all in. And then often when the baby wriggles, even in the water, often when they wriggle finally, there's a time to receive and actually hold and connect. But you're meeting and you're landing. I think it's very beautiful. And, we're only talking about 10 or 20 seconds maybe, it might be a minute. It's nothing. But in this period, time is stretching, because the moments are everyone is so present. And when we give presence to something, it's it expands. Yeah. Magic times. That's so beautiful that you guys felt that. I love it.
It was very special. And then I have incredible photos of my sister, her face, because and I have photos of his head coming out, step by step. And my sister's face, and full of tears, watching all this, so amazing memories too as a family. And then afterwards, it's just so magical. The pain's gone, everything's finished. And that was such a blissful time. I have so good, really good memories. Like my mom, she'd done this huge vegetarian dal, and we were just, all the midwives were so hungry after the night. It was one, my labor started at, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning, and he was born at 1 p.m. So, long labor, but normal length for first baby. Yeah. And of course, everyone was hungry. And so they were all with a, vegetable dal eating, and we were all chatting together and, telling birth stories, because of course, doulas and midwives together, we sort of get chatting and talking about, beautiful stories we all had. And it was such an amazing moment, this sort of tribe of women around you and everyone eating and drinking tea and laughing, and you there with your newborn, and it just seems, an out of body experience.
Tribe of women.
I think the postpartum time, I was lucky. It was easy. I think the hormones did a lot. I was full of energy. I was feeling great physically. I didn't need any, stitching. And I really recuperated really quickly in the next few days, and I felt great. And then the breastfeeding journey was really, really hard. So that's like another, almost another story in itself. But yeah, that sort of then sort of puts a bit of a toll on you, because, you're just breastfeeding all day, all night, and, baby's not gaining weight as he should and all of that. But at the beginning, it was just magical, like the birth hormones, what they can do.
And it is, you're witnessing magic. I mean, the whole thing is just magical, it's just magical, the whole thing. And I'm just so I'm so touched by just birthing with a tribe of women. It really is the way it always happened. Your sister, your mum, your doulas, the midwives, it's just the way it's been happening since the beginning of time. Sure, some women on their own, or some maybe with just one person, but if you were in a village, those people would have been around, particularly for a first labor. And
exactly. And if couples look at, I love that, probably one of the only series TV shows that shows a bit how birth looks at. It's, the BBC show called The Midwife.
Yes.
And that shows exactly how, you would have the neighbors behind the door and everyone waiting, and passing water, and because that's how it was. You're right. It was a village business.
It was. And, when women are together, just together, oxytocin increases. So it's all more safety, more confidence, more calm, just because of women being together. Because, of course, the reptilian brain, mammalian brain, it knows that this is how it's always happened. It just knows, and we just feel safer. We feel safer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I also realized what was interesting, and, really in Australia, I was working with a lot of French couples, of course, as a doula, because, I'm French. And now that I'm here in France, I'm working with a lot of expats couples and a lot of English-speaking couples. But also I realized I really believe birthing in your own language is really important. And I remember my mom told me that, 37 years ago, when she had me in France, and she didn't speak a word of French at the time, being from South Africa. And, she went to the Anglo-Saxon hospital in Paris, so she could at least have an Irish midwife, who spoke her language. But it's just so essential, because that's just what comes up, and it's your basic needs. And, it's so much easier to be able to say it in your own language rather than having to think.
Oh my God, that must be so hard, trying to translate in your own mind on top of just having to communicate anything while in labour. That's what the beautiful company that we've done fundraising for, Birth for Humankind, do as well for the refugees, try and give them a doula that, can speak their own language. But, just back to that point of having women present at births, there's all these reasons that sometimes systems create in terms of oh no, we can't have doulas in the hospital. And we saw it a lot in COVID, right? You can bring your partner or a doula. And I think we had one mum, in that time choose a doula over the partner, but everyone else chose their partner, right?
I remember.
Which is pretty understandable. And I think it was a very unfair ultimatum to give a lot of families, to put them in that scenario. And I'm not saying that legislation or that ruling from the individual hospitals did it, but I just wonder if sometimes the system in France doesn't actually want women to have their own power in birth. Because can you just tell us a little bit about the situation over there?
Absolutely. It's so interesting. And I even when I chat to she-birth couples, I often share a little bit of the insight of what happens here, because I think looking at what happened overseas also gives you a bit of understanding of your own system. And in France, we have something very particular, that we have 80% of women who have an epidural at birth. 80%. So that's absolutely huge. Even other countries will be like 30, maybe 40%. But that's like, one of the biggest numbers in the world. And for me, that means already a lot about how we perceive birth, because it means that we don't accept that birth is a painful process. And we don't accept that that's just a reality. And so a lot of women in France will go in birth and say, I want an epidural, and that's my number one choice. Whether what I had always witnessed in Australia was women rather saying, I'd like to do without. I'll try my best and do without. But, if I end up having an epidural, I'll be okay with it. That's what you would hear.
That's the majority for sure.
You go into birth and you're like, no, I'm having the epidural. Like, there's no question.
I know. I've heard about women in France, like turning up to the hospital, like 2 or 3 centimeters, like, okay, I want my epidural now.
But I promise, like, that's what happens, probably 1 birth out of 2. Like, I mean, even more, 2 out of 3, I would say.
It's wild. It's wild.
And I think there's definitely a movement now happening. There's probably always been that movement, but I'd say it's probably growing a bit of, wanting more of a physiological birth and, reading and being interested in all that. And so slowly but surely, even though doulas have existed in France for 20 years, and, they have like a, little organization, a national organization, slowly I think it's becoming more popular. But there's so much resistance all around. Like, we've had a horrible article in a magazine, saying doulas are like hippies and, they're dangerous because, I think we have a lot of push in France against anything to do with holistic medicine or holistic approaches. It's like a forbidden word.
Wow. Because I remember when I was in France, probably like, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, I met up, maybe longer, I don't know. I met up with a friend, and she was the head of the doula organization there. And I mean, I couldn't believe how few births she'd been at, like, to be heading up this organization, but she was pretty experienced. And she said that in the legislation, doulas are considered to be a cult. And a cult, by definition, is any group that gathers and lights candles together. I'm like, I don't know. I never lit a candle with my doulas. I don't know. I don't like get together. I might get together for a glass of wine, or we might, but it's like so weird.
And I think that's also the problem is, I think maybe the people who did the job in the first place were very alternative people with very alternative views on life in general. And so that brings the image of like a doula is like, so in France, being a hippie is not a compliment. So it's like, doulas are hippies and, they're there with their shamanic drums. And I'm like, no, we're not all like that. Everyone's different, and some doulas will be very evidence-based, and some, definitely will be on a more spiritual spectrum. And I mean, that's what we do at she-birth, right? We have this diversity in doulas also, so you can match with different clients. And I think in France, we really have that image that sort of is attached to the role of a doula. So doulas can't, so there's a lot of prenatal work that's done, prenatal visits and postnatal, but not much birth attendance. And for me, that was just, I couldn't understand, because even like all the doulas will base their arguments on, the famous Cochrane study review where, we're saying that the presence of a doula in labor, will reduce, episiotomy and, will help, like natural
all
birth,
the interventions, yeah.
Exactly. And so all the doulas are using that as an argument. But then I'm like, but no one's actually going to a birth. And the whole point of the study is at birth.
Is continuity over birth. Yeah. Continuity across the whole period. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's not much continuity in France at all, anyway, within the system. You would only have home birth midwives. You have a few, so they've created birth houses in France, maison naissance. And that was an experimental test at a national level. And they opened a few in France and realized it was successful. And
I was going to say, that's really like promising. That's really promising to have beautiful birth houses. That's awesome.
Yeah. And, I think they had 8 initially, and now they're hoping to go up to 20 in the whole of France. So that's fantastic. But of course, it's only in one area, and you won't have, some places is totally medical, deserts, and you can't have a home birth midwife. People travel, some home birth midwives travel 2 hours, to go and see clients, 1 hour and a half. Some couples decide to go and birth in another region to have a home birth midwife. So I've tried to involve myself also, as a volunteer in the home birth space here in France, because, the medical system is very anti-doula. Midwives generally don't like us. And, when I chat to home birth midwives or, more holistic midwives, of course they understand our role and our relationship is great. I mean, one of my very good friends here is a midwife. But I think the hospital midwives, and even, for example, this week, I went to one of the main hospitals in Paris, who's known to be quite a physiological hospital. And, I went to actually meet, the head of staff to see if I could, be present with a couple who were birthing there. And she didn't even want to meet me. And she said, to my client, she said, listen, we've had problems with doulas in the past, and we just don't want doulas present anymore because it puts the staff in a difficult situation. And understandably, she doesn't want her staff to feel uncomfortable. But I'm a bit like, okay, well, where are we going from there? Okay,
I suppose I just have red flags around that, because that sounds to me like she doesn't want a doula present because she doesn't want them to be witnessed when the midwives are being worked as obstetric slaves in coercion of intervention. And
that's exactly
what it sounds like. That's what she said. Right.
One of the stories she told my client was that, once a mom turned towards her doula instead of turning towards a medical team when there was a decision to be made. And that put the team in a difficult situation, And as I was saying to my clients, I was like, well, of course, a woman or a couple will turn towards a doula because you've built that trust,
emotional bond,
built that relationship. And, that midwife who's looking after you that day, you've just met for the first time on that day. So, of course, you'll turn towards your doula. It doesn't mean that us as doulas, we are anti-medical.
No, and it doesn't mean, and I think that's the thing, a doula never tells. They don't understand the role of doula. I mean, I think that's the problem. A doula doesn't give advice,
exactly.
Just like an educator doesn't give advice, because I'm not in your body and I don't know what's right for you. But I will help you find the decision, make the decision that's right for you. And I'll help advocate. You advocate for yourself, and I'll help you and hold you emotionally as you make tough decisions, And I think, I've had that too. And I can see when, a client turns towards me after a medical, suggestion has been made. And that's normal. We are part of the team. Yeah.
Exactly. So, she'll turn towards her partner,
Yeah, it's everyone's got to make that decision. Yeah, for sure.
So I think it's a real problem. And I know the local organization, they've put in a really strict chart for doulas to be able to work. So when you're part of that organization, so it's called, the French Doula Association, you have to obey by this chart. And for example, one of the points of this chart is we are not allowed to go at home with a couple in pre-labor. And at first I was like, I can't sign this chart. That makes absolutely no sense, because of course I need to go at home to support a couple before they go to the hospital. Like, that's what I've always done it. And of course you can, some couples, they'll be in their little bubble and they'll be happy for you to meet them at the hospital. But most first-time parents, they love having their doula with them at home and, get the hormones going and all of that. Yeah. And with that chart that I signed, I'm not allowed to do that. And of course, I want to be involved in the national organization for doulas because it's really important. But, I'm going to fight that rule because I just don't agree with it. But I also understand the point of view of the national organization, where they believe that in France, if something goes wrong, and if, I don't know, the couple decides not to go to the hospital, or if, labor's very quick and something happens, legally, if the hospital puts a complaint in, it might turn against the doula.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've just had an incident, haven't you, in France with people free birthing?
Exactly. We had a couple free birthing, and everything went fine. And, after a few days, they went to declare the birth at the, local town hall, like you're supposed to do. And the lady at the town hall, she just freaked out when she understood they had a home birth and there was no one attending the birth medically. And so she contacted, the sort of social, mother and child network. And they freaked out. And then it just escalated from there. And the parents actually ended up having their children removed. So both their children, because they had an older, like a 2 or 3 year old, and then their newborn actually got removed. And, looking back on it, they were definitely like alternative parents, who were making, choices that they believed were right for their family. Maybe like in the homeschooling world and all of that. And that's just, in France, we don't like people that don't obey with the system.
Well, we did see that actually.
We don't know about that story.
We certainly saw that during COVID, the strictness of the rules and the riots as well. Like Victoria here. But I suppose, God, that's just, nothing warrants taking a newborn away or a child away from their family because of their choice of birth. It's your body, your sovereignty, your family, exactly. How dare they?
I mean, legally, there's no text that says you can't have a home birth.
It's not a home birth; it's a free birth. Exactly. It's a free birth,
there's
right?
Nothing that says you can't have a free birth. So it was really based, I guess, on other points,
But did they get their children? Please tell me the children have gone back.
Yeah, it did last quite a bit, though, like several weeks. The kids were away for several weeks.
I mean, I would sue for damages. I mean, that's horrific.
Terrible. Yeah, it's terrible. And that's, now they've sort of gone off from, because, of course, they'd been sort of putting, info on social media. So now they've totally gone out and said, we really need to focus on our family and recreating bonds and everything. Very understandable. But and that's not the only one. There was another story before that. So it's, I think that the limit is really very fine and a bit dangerous. And that's why I think a lot of the doulas are also worried about all that,
Okay. So these paradigms.
Our role.
Yeah.
So luckily we do have hospitals who welcome doulas, and there's one hospital in suburbs of Paris who will welcome doulas with open arms. And I've had great birth supporting clients, and of course home birth, and then other structures that will allow, but it's totally limited compared to what happens overseas. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, in Australia particularly as well. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, even the States and England, there's, even though like the States is a very the medical system is huge, doulas are just,
their insurance, they're provided by some insurance. It's not a huge majority. It's a pretty small majority, but a small group. But they're much more accepted and adopted in the hospital systems. They're welcomed in a way. I think that's it. It comes down to the person's rights. It's about individual rights versus the sort of rights of the state or the rights of the collective. And it's interesting, COVID brought a lot of this conversation up, and it's just interesting congruence there for France in the birthing as well, right? It's conflict of individual and collective rights. Well, we've covered so much in your amazing story, and I feel very blessed to have heard your magical story. I think it's so beautiful that it's such a magical spiritual conception, such a connected conception, and and birth, and you did so beautifully. Like, you were just so graceful through the whole thing, and a beautiful example to women, I think, especially women that might be considering, being a mum on their own. It's such, a pedestaled example for people to look towards as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a big decision. And I love working with solo moms. I think also going through that life experience, it definitely gives you a sense of what it is to be a different family also. And that will be for a long time. So also, it's connect. I mean, I was already working with, different communities beforehand, and, trying to support couples of same sex, but I think it made it even more important for me to, also surround my son with this diversity, and to be able to support, LGBTQI community, and, how they struggle with the birth world also, because I went to scans where, the lady's like, okay, so do you want to send photos to your husband? And I'm like, no, there's no husband. I mean, all those awkward discussions that you have with medical teams, because they automatically assume that there's a father. And, also training everyone to have a more inclusive language, and to think about the diverse families that are there. I think we do it quite well in Australia. There's definitely some improvement to be made. But keeping that in mind too, definitely.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing for us all to think about as well. And we touch on that as well with the Laurens in their birth story as well. What's good to say, what to be mindful of saying, how to say things, like, and asking if you don't know as well. Is there's anything that you would like to say to families out there, particularly pregnant families, anything at all you want to share, some pearls of wisdom?
I think maybe in terms of, making a choice for doulas, because that's also what I support so many families in she birth, matching them with a doula. And also wanting to share that, even if you're a doula and you haven't had kids, it doesn't mean that you can't be a great doula. Because, I always say we trust obstetricians, the male obstetricians, and, they've never pushed a baby out of their vagina. So, a doula who hasn't had kids, and I'm thinking of some girls on the team who, have 15 or 20 years experience, and they haven't had children, and they won't have children. And they can, you can still be of service to women, even though you haven't had that physical experience yourself. And I think it's much more important to have someone that you're really connecting with, and you have a beautiful match and bond with, is much more important than having someone who has, 15 years experience and who's had 5 babies. I mean, it's not only about that. Being a doula is so much more, and it's her presence. And you can sometimes have a young doula. I was a young doula when I started, and I didn't have kids. And you can be so present for that family and so happy to support them.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know you take people through that matching process, so beautifully. And Caroline too, with the doulas and our families. And, you're working off personalities and the archetype of the mother figure or the sister figure and the queen doula figure and whatever other archetypes in there. But at the end of the day, I think it is about how you feel. And you've got to start learning in pregnancy. For a lot of us, it begins there. And hopefully before, if you're listening to this and you're not pregnant, like, start trusting how you feel in your body around other people. And if you feel that resonance, if you feel that relaxation, if you feel that warmth, if you feel the heart open, whatever it is for you, trust those feelings and those signals inside yourself, and go for it, and every woman should have a doula, right? Every woman deserves a doula.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah. Well, thanks, darling. Thank you for sharing. I'll speak to you soon at our team meeting.
Bye.
Bye. I'm Nadine Richardson, and you've been listening to the She Births Show. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review. We'd love to know what you would like to hear more of. You can find me and my team of amazing doulas and educators at shebirths.com and our awesome community on Instagram and Facebook. Within any good app store, you can download our free pregnancy guide via She Births, 2 separate words and plural, as well as access our range of online courses. Remember, when it comes to having a better birth, an easier transition into parenthood, your education is your empowerment. Don't forget to check out the catalogue of previous podcasts, and thank you for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed the show.
Yeah, so I mean, the rise of the feminine in the world, it's like slow and steady. And currently the stronger position and the fears that it encounters, it's probably meaning that it will be too slow and it won't achieve what it needs to do, or at least in time, like to reverse the harm. For me, the feminine, I mean, it's not about gender, right? It's like, for me, the feminine, it's like intuition and creativity. And it's also resilience and self-awareness, or like, you know, the part of like connection and collaboration between us. And today we live in a new paradigm, and it requires, and it's desperate for those qualities to come forward, because the nature of our destination, it has changed. And for me, only visionaries or creative minds will be able to take us to the next level of evolution. The current way of viewing and thinking our world, it's just not working. It's totally out of date. And our alarming situation, I think it requires ideas and concepts that don't even exist yet. You know, whether it's on climate, on economy, on social justice, or even on relationships. I saw an amazing documentary on that the other day on, like, you know, the rise of water and how our city's trying to totally rethink. Not even rethink, it's like invent new ideas that don't even exist and concepts that don't even exist. You know, how can we collaborate? How can we ask for help? How can we connect and respect others? You know, to be resilient to change, and most of all, to be creative. And that's why a feminine system can be the only way operating for the 21st century. We need to just reinvent ourselves and our way of doing things. I'd say on a personal level, the rise of the feminine really took me like on a journey that I never thought I would be bold enough to explore. It made me see myself in a more honest light, and it also helped me to do the introspection that was necessary to ask myself the right questions. It gave me like the resilience and the intuition to go through those like really difficult times and to make those difficult decisions. And it also helped me to make choices that were not standard. It was very much about like shifting and rethinking the traditional structures I had been brought up with. So from time to time, I'll have friends who'll say to me, like, I never could have made that choice of becoming a solo mom. How brave. But it honestly has nothing to do with bravery. It's really the mind shifting that made that decision possible. And that can only happen over time and like deconstruction. And that major deconstruction that I experienced, it's now leading me to other choices that just don't fit like the classic journey. You know, building a collaborative life, like buying a home with my sister rather than a partner. Opening that home for others to come and live. Also like rethinking my work and my relationship to financial security, or even finding like a different way of building an intimate relationship with a partner. What's also interesting is, you know, I personally became a doula like on my quest of contributing to the changes that are needed in our world. And as a French birth expert, Michel Audin says, to change the world, we must first change the way babies are being born. And for me, that means, of course, starting at the beginning for the newcomers, the babies, but also for the new parents. Like birth and parenting are really gateways or opportunities for all of us to access another level of consciousness. A consciousness of what is around us, and another level of awareness of self too. And as doulas, we not only witness, but we also support that growth or change. And this defragmentation I was talking about, for me, it very often makes us yearn for something else. Like during pregnancy or after, wanting to change jobs or careers after having a baby, for example. It happens so often. We want just sort of more self-expression and meaning in our lives.